answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
I woke up this morning, got myself a gun. Mama always said I'd be the chosen one.
Speech showed both humility and strength. He talked about Maine giving him grace, Maine giving him a second chance. He talked about the need to earn people's votes. So this was not an arrogant speech. He understands he needs to do work, and he understands they're giving him a chance at redemption. And yet he was strong. He said, I'm going to tax the billionaires. I'm not going to have these foreign wars. I'm going to take on the corporate interests and PAC money. I'm going to call for the release of the Epstein files. We have not had a candidate with that kind of clarity and strength run against Collins.
Good God. That is Congressman Ro Khanna of California praising Graham Plattner for winning the Democrat primary to run against Susan Collins in Maine. Considering the record and what we know for fact about Graham Plattner, who had a Nazi tattoo for 20 years, and, I didn't know what that was. The very people who are calling Trump and continue to say he and his supporters are Nazis, they are now bringing a Nazi into their midst because they hate Trump so much, and they hate you. And they want to defeat Susan Collins so they get another seat in the Senate. So effing, oh, God, desperate. I do not want ever again to hear the left try to lecture me about morals, period. They're willing to sacrifice supposedly their high ground, which they've never been on anyway, to elect a guy just so they can hopefully control the Senate, a guy that they basically have a lot of issues with, even AOC condemning him in one way, but at the same time, yeah, I'm going to vote. I'll give you more of that in a moment. And, of course, even the other day, Sonny Hostin on The View said, if I were a Maine voter, I would just hold my nose and go ahead and vote for him. This is the kind of candidate that Ro Khanna is praising, saying he delivered an exceptional speech of humility. He's the only one that will stand up to Trump. Susan Collins has stood up to Trump numerous times. This is how desperate they are. So, again, do not lecture me on morality. More of that coming up, plus Trump's response to the U.S. chopper being shot down. By the way, word is broken. You know that chopper that got shot down by an Iranian drone? Apparently, the drone landed between the two pilots in the craft. It crashed through their craft and is between the two of them. It didn't explode. Thank God. And they have to put down on the sea, and we rescue them. And Trump has made it very clear now dealing with Iran. He has made it as clear as it can be. He is warning Iran the time for talks is over. You either act now or you pay the price. Good. And we've already struck back at some of their facilities because of the drone attack on our helicopter. You're not going to be able to shoot U.S. servicemen and women or our equipment and get away with it. And Trump's remark again, the time for talks is over. Either act now or you will pay the price. Welcome to the Larry Connors USA, hour number one. And yes, as always, we're like a bull charging out of the gate. And with Larry Connors USA, we're here for you every Monday through Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. And you can watch the program. I encourage you to do it. Go to NewsTalkSTL Rumble, Larry Connors USA Rumble, Facebook or Twitter. And remember, everything goes up as a podcast later at NewsTalkSTL, LarryConnorsUSA.com, Larry Connors USA Facebook, audio and video. So if you have to break away and you cannot stay the entire full 2 hours, pull it up later. And when you watch or listen later, push share. Send it on to some of your family and friends. Get them involved. With Larry Connors USA, you're always going to have news, analysis, opinion, and education. You will leave each hour with more information than you have when we begin that hour. That is my guarantee, and I promise. In our next hour, a woman who had to leave our nation to try to save her children's lives because they were not being allowed to get the drugs that children needed here. She had to go to Italy. I thought Robert F. Kennedy was going to take care of a lot of this. He may still be working on it, but this woman made her own decision. Her story coming up later. Later in this hour, a financial expert. The SpaceX IPO is going to be released, and he says it will change the world of investing and the world in general. This is going to be a multi-trillion-dollar offering to buy stock in SpaceX, Elon Musk program. Can you get in on the ground floor? Well, you can't quite get in on the ground floor, but you can get in maybe early if you choose. I'm not advising you. I'm just telling you it will quite literally rocket, according to the expert. That's coming up a little bit later. You'll want to hear that. And this hour, our story behind the story, a little lighter than what we sometimes do. This time, do you remember when you were first learning to drive? Who taught you? How well did you do? And then, did you teach your children to drive? How well did that go? Oh, we'll have some fun with that. The story behind the story before we wrap up this hour. Once again, the Graham Plattner winning the Maine Democrat primary to go against Susan Collins. AOC, one of the most progressive of the progressive, speaking about Graham Plattner and all the stuff that's around him, despite what you heard California Congressman Ro Khanna, Democrat, say, well, he gave a great speech and did it with humility. Do they not know the guy's going to lie to them as well, whatever he needs to do to get what he wants? AOC says, it's hard on my stomach. It is hard to stomach. But I'm going to support Plattner if I can. This is the attitude of the left. While they're demonizing Trump and anyone who follows him. They're endorsing, welcoming into their camp a Nazi. Sure, Michael Singleton, a GOP analyst.
Perhaps clarity, but not moral clarity. He talked about grace. He had several different lines about grace. What about the grace for the women who made serious allegations against him, reported in the New York Times? He talked about Susan Collins being corrupt. He talked about Susan Collins voting to give funding to ICE, taking our neighbors and putting them in unmarked vans. So now he's a warrior for minorities. The same guy with a Nazi tattoo, and he didn't know it was a Nazi tattoo, or the only people I know who get Nazi tattoos on their chest are actual Nazis.
Yep.
This is going to be an election about character. Now, the voters in Maine may not like every single thing about Susan Collins, but Susan Collins is a woman who broke a lot of history, who does have bipartisan support, who has not always voted with her party. She's not a person who supports women merely when it's convenient for her, as we're seeing with Graham Plattner, who I thought it was very ironic that he was surrounded by a ton of women in the midst of giving this campaign speech. This will come down to someone they know versus a guy who uses and says whatever he has to say to get his way, and I don't think it's going to work.
No, I agree with Sir Michael Singleton, again, a GOP analyst. But the left is they've even tricked themselves. They are deceiving themselves. You heard him mention funding for Custom Enforcement and Border Protection. The president has signed, as it was passed, the $70 billion legislative package to fund immigration and customs enforcement, ICE, and Customs and Border Protection through 2029. Good, that is finally done. In the meantime, in the Congress, they continue with their hearings looking into the Southern Poverty Law Center after the DOJ charged the Southern Poverty Law Center with defrauding donors, taking some of their money, giving it to hate groups so they would have a boogeyman to fight and get more money brought in. Texas Congressman Gooden speaking to the CEO and acting president of the Southern Poverty Law Center.
During the Biden-Harris administration, the SPLC included many mainstream conservative groups in their hate map, including Alliance Defending Freedom, Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA, and Family Research Council. To your knowledge, did the SPLC include Antifa, which is an actual domestic terrorist organization, in its hate group?
We have a list that identifies groups based on the statements that they and their leaders make.
Is Antifa on your hate map?
Again, as I said earlier, Congressman Gooden,
So they're not. Let me ask you this. Has SPLC labeled the radical left group Jane's Revenge as a hate group? This group has publicly taken responsibility for vandalizing and destroying pregnancy resource centers and Catholic churches since May 2022. Have you all designated that on your hate map?
Congressman Gooden, if you've looked at our hate map, you know the criteria we set for designating groups.
Yes or no?
So destroying pregnancy resource centers and Catholic churches would not qualify as hate under your definition. You guys are okay with that. But God forbid Turning Point holds a rally. That's considered hate, but destroying a Catholic church or a pregnancy resource is not. Just to be clear, help me understand.
The SPLC establishes its own criteria, and any other group can create its own list. Under our criteria, we've designated those groups based on what they've said.
Under your criteria, Turning Point USA, Family Research Council, and other conservative Christian groups are considered hate groups. But Antifa and Jane's Revenge that burns down Catholic churches and pregnancy resource centers, those are not hate groups. It sounds like you're really proud of that process. I'll move on because I frankly think it's disgusting. And you know what? I'd actually ask for you to add me to your hate map. I'd be honored to be on it. It sounds like it'd be in great company.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Add Larry Connors USA to your hate groups. The niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Alveda King, says when you target Christians as haters, here she is.
I reject hatred. I reject white supremacy. I reject any ideology that seeks to elevate one group of people above another. But I also reject the notion that Americans who hold traditional Christian beliefs should be treated as threats or terrorists simply because we disagree with a prevailing political thought. Today, I still have a dream. I dream that one day we will move beyond black power and white power and embrace God's power and human dignity.
Yes.
I dream that Americans will one day see each other not as enemies, but as neighbors. I dream that we will hear each other, see each other, and recognize that every human life has value from the womb to the tomb and beyond.
Yes.
We
Amen.
are, as Scripture teaches, as science testified, one blood, one human race.
Yes.
And if we remember that truth, we can build a future worthy of the sacrifices made by those who came before us. We must speak out for truth and against the forces that would manufacture hate, fear, division, and violence simply to line their pockets and further their political ambitions.
Can I get an amen for Dr. Alveda King? Amen, amen, amen. Now, uncovering more fraud. Just when you think it really can't get any worse, it does. Louisiana Congressman Higgins.
According to my research, which will very soon be revealed next week, they've rescued so far 35,000 tender-age kids. How you like that? Now, according to Ms. Hopper's research, which I find fascinating, and everybody up here should, 70% of the documentation turned in by so-called sponsors, which were lined up by who? The NGOs. Through who? Primarily HHS. There's a pipeline, man. We fed a pipeline of tender-age children into sex trafficking and slave labor into our country. We're finding these kids. We're tracking this fraudulent documents. You're right, Ms. Hopper. So be advised. We are building out case files, criminal case files. We're interviewing these 35,000 kids, and we're finding out exactly what the hell happened, how they ended up in the nightmare where they were, and we're rescuing more. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. We're going to identify these children. We're locating these children. We're rescuing these children. And we're building out criminal files based upon the testimony of these young teenagers and the documentation of fraudulent vetting.
Fraudulent. It was modern-day slavery under the Biden era and Democrats supporting him. Let the kids come in so they can go into sex dens or wherever else. You don't even begin to think about what happened to those children and how many are still alive. And then we have another issue with a massive fraud involving H-1 visa programs of those coming from India.
One former official tells Newsweek that up to 90% of applications, 90% from India, contain fraudulent documents or involve unqualified applicants. And finance law enforcement in India claim it has uncovered a network of universities that produce fake degrees which were possibly used to obtain these high-skilled H-1B visas, including one school which allegedly stole over 36,000 fake degrees, sold, I should say. It cost as little as $1,400 for one of those. And while these are supposed to be high-skilled employees, during almost all of Biden's time in office, 83% got junior or entry-level positions. And now Texas is taking action, cracking down on those abusing the program.
Good. I'm glad we are. A World Cup referee from Somalia denied entry to our nation. He was sent back to Somalia, and he got greeted by a crowd of supporters. He was going to be at our World Cup events, serving as a referee, but we have connections between him and some of the terrorists. Secretary of State Rubio.
The Iranian team has chosen to stay in Mexico as opposed to the United States in the beginning of the match. And we have no problem with the athletes, as we stated earlier, or their support staff. But what we're not going to allow is for them to embed in their delegation a bunch of people that we know have nothing to do with athletics and have ties to the IRGC or things of that nature. So we were going to watch that very closely, and we'll continue to watch that very closely. But by and large, I don't anticipate that problem with any other country.
Good, because it's not against the athletes, but the nation of Iran, and how many of those athletes are actually members of the IRGC and other terrorist groups and looking to invade and get intel inside our nation. So the Iranian team will be in Mexico for their initial matches. And that Somalia World Cup referee that had ties to terrorists, they sent him packing home. Go back. You're not being allowed to come in. By the way, the men's national soccer team will open its World Cup campaign against Paraguay Friday. And you know what? There's still tickets available, in part because of the cost, and I don't doubt that in part because fear of terrorism. I'll be honest with you about that. We'll get into that a little bit later in our next hour. Coming up, one expert says the SpaceX IPO being offered this week will change the world of investing and more. You want to hear what he has to say. It might affect your financial future. And our story behind the story, learning to drive and teaching your kids to drive. Lock and load. Ready on the right.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
Another day must be another roofer in town. And John Beal and I were talking. He said, you know, every time you turn around, there's a new roofing company. Many of them have no idea what they're doing, and the statistics show that many will be out of business within 2 to 5 years. Who are you going to call to help you then? You need to remember only one name, John Beal. John Beal Roofing. You have a problem, he can take care of it. And we'll be here for you. John Beal Roofing. Call 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF. Spring weather has everyone sneezing, even inside their home or building. Instead of saying Gesundheit, call Wellington Environmental to perform air tests to determine if mold levels are too high. Gesundheit is the same as saying bless you after someone sneezes, the German word meaning wishing you good health. Wellington Environmental can perform air testing that is simple, fast, and can identify issues keeping you from having good health. Wellington does the same for hospitals and nursing homes for indoor concerns. Give them a call. It's simple. 314-644-4930. 644-4930. Tell Cindy, I need air sampling. They've seen it all. They can help you. Next time you hear Gesundheit, think Wellington. Wellington Environmental. Be well with Wellington. True comfort is something you should feel every day in your home. It's the quiet of your mornings, the consistency of your indoor temperature, the way your home feels season after season. With Renewal by Andersen, from consultation through installation, everything is handled by one experienced team, built around your home, your schedule. Our exclusive Fibrex material, stronger than vinyl, built for extreme temperatures. And right now, you can save 20% off your entire project. Plus, take an additional $100 off every window and door, up to $1,000. 20% off the entire project. Flexible financing is available, but you need to call by April 30th. 877-WINDOWS. RenewalByAndersen.com. 877-WINDOWS. RenewalByAndersen.com. It's that time of season when families, businesses are moving. For local or long distance, I endorse McGuire Moving. Get a date set soon before the schedules are booked. 314-241-0600. 241-0600. McGuire is constantly giving back to our veterans, such as Support Dogs for Our Brave. So with McGuire, you're getting excellent service and helping our vets. McGuireMoving.com.
This is News Talk STL.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
This Friday, Elon Musk is offering a SpaceX IPO. Now, that is an investor's potential offering and a chance for you to get in, reference SpaceX planned orbital AI data centers and everything else. They say it's going to be the largest IPO in history this week. Some say it could change investing worldwide. Wall Street, according to one source, my source you're getting ready to hear from, is not prepared to what's going to happen when this SpaceX project goes public. Joining us now, Kerry Lutz. He's the host of Financial Survival Network broadcast. Kerry, glad to have you on board.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, and this is an exciting moment. It used to be that GDP was limited to what we could produce on the Earth, and now GDP is going to be unlimited by what we can put into the sky and into orbit and wherever else we can fit the stuff.
All right, now what I've been getting, that you already have billionaire insiders. They've probably gotten a lot of positions bought, stock in this IPO getting ready to be offered Friday. And it's already a $3 trillion cap or something like that. Give me some numbers, and can the common man get a chance to get into it, or should they?
Well, so if we look at AI as the great multiplier of productivity, and let's put aside the fact whether or not it needs us eventually or not, whether it can just run everything, but if it can increase productivity by 10 to 100 times, then, and believe me, I'm not boosting the stock. I'm just saying the potential of what humanity we thought was capable of has just increased geometrically. And, you know, it could lead to a wealth effect for the entirety of humanity. And Wall Street doesn't know how to deal with this. Look, nobody knows how to deal with AI currently and at the rate that it's going. And, you know, my feeling is that SpaceX could be the ultimate play on AI because it gets rid of certain limitations. Just one phase of it gets rid of the limitations of earthbound data centers. That's heat, that's water, it's
data
energy,
centers, all of that.
Because you get 5 times more solar. We've been powering satellites with solar for 40 years now.
Yeah.
And the ability to to power whole data centers is amazing. And that's not even talking about the payloads, the defense contracts, and everything else. This company is a game changer, and therefore its public offering is a game changer. Like I said, I don't give financial advice.
Right.
I'm observing the societal trend and the effect that it's going to have upon markets and upon economies around the world.
Let me break down a couple things. Again, you're listening to Kerry Lutz. He's an attorney. He's also host of his own broadcast, Financial Survival Network. Also has a Substack, Financial Survival Network Substack. You can look up. Kerry, when it is offered as an IPO Friday.
Hello.
Yeah, you got me. You hear me, Kerry? All right. Well, for all the technology we're talking about, apparently we can't keep a phone call together, and we're in the process of relinking with them. In fact, I was getting ready to bring up that Starlink alone has already demonstrated that space can generate recurring cash flow on a global scale, because we already have millions of users relying on satellite internet services.
Yeah. Well,
all right, Kerry, back. I want to ask some questions in our closing time. Again, you're listening to Kerry Lutz. He's an attorney, also host of his own broadcast program, Financial Survival Network broadcast, and a Financial Survival Network Substack. Kerry, when it goes to market Friday, when it opens up, what are the estimates being presented right now as the opening price when the bell rings?
Yeah, I'm kind of wary of them. If a lot of the current investors want to cash out for whatever reason, then this is their exit window. But on the other hand, they're not selling the whole company. They're selling, I think, $85 billion worth of the company. So, you could easily, in these situations with a big hyped IPO, you could see it double in a very short period of time. Again, I'm not saying that's going to happen.
Right.
It's possible, or if enough of the initial investors want to take their billions out, you could see it sink. And that could be a buying opportunity.
And again, we're making it clear to the public, we're not advising you to do one way or the other, just understanding the basics. No. You point out in your Substack, the metrics that they're looking at are very similar to what they did with Amazon when Amazon came out as an IPO. And a lot of folks thought they missed the boat with that one. And yet we're seeing the same metrics being applied in this case.
Yeah, very much so. Except that this market makes Amazon's market puny by comparison.
Wow.
We're talking trillions of dollars here.
Yeah, $3
and this
trillion.
Will make Elon Musk.
$3 trillion plus. Yeah. That's a staggering amount.
Yeah, well, we're also looking at dollars that are worth a lot less than they were just a few years ago. Let's keep it in perspective. But this is a wealth-generating event that we haven't seen the likes of before. And honestly, Amazon could fit in Musk's back pocket once this deal is done. He's going to be the first trillionaire.
The other thing is, a lot of folks that may not invest directly in the market, they use mutual funds, or their pension funds are wrapped into it, or things of that nature. Those fund managers are probably going to be looking at getting into some of this too. So some of their money is being put on the line when this IPO opens up.
Oh, yeah. It has to be because these funds, ETFs, they invest in indexes of stocks. And this is going to be the third or fourth largest stock by market cap, just after NVIDIA, maybe the second. And they can't ignore it, so they have to put money into it. So that's another factor. And if it's a weighted fund, they have to put in as much money as that stock represents as a percentage of the index. And when a stock is at $3 or $4 or $5 trillion, that's a significant chunk of money that has to buy the stock. It's captive purchasing.
Now, I want to move away from the stock pricing and that, which is a very big issue, not trying to dismiss it. But you point out in your Substack, the biggest consequences of this IPO will not be financial, it will be psychological. Please explain.
Yeah, because I don't want to make a bad pun here, but let's face it, the sky's the limit.
Ah, that's a bad pun, but accurate. Go ahead.
You know, what limits do we have? I mean, one thing I've learned in life is never bet against two people in the world, Donald Trump and Elon Musk. You bet against them, it's at your peril.
Yeah.
I was a Tesla skeptic when the first Teslas came out. I said, it's a nice niche car, but it's built like garbage. It'll never do anything. I'm on my third Tesla now.
And you have bought the stock by now, right?
Yeah, by now. But one thing that I just want to say is, like, it's not just they're renting out to XAI is renting out data centers now that they built that are beyond their needs, and they're renting them out to Google and to Claude for $1 billion each a month. That's $24 billion right there. I mean, it's a shocking sum of money.
Let me go.
And nobody knows how to build an AI warehouse like Elon Musk. He does it in record time.
Let me go in our closing minute. Let me go one step deeper. And you're going about 60 seconds, and you're a broadcaster, you're aware of that. But how does the fear of what's the value of this, of the U.S. doing this and China?
Mm-hmm. Well, you got to understand something fundamental about AI and why the Chinese are lagging behind. They're like XAI, and they try to color the AI's output, but they don't censor it. China censors AI.
Yep.
And it's the concept: if a butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, there's a storm, 3 weeks later, 2,000 miles away.
Yeah, the butterfly effect.
When you censor Tiananmen Square and everything that happened as a result of it, you're deliberately giving your AI a lobotomy.
All right.
Okay.
Kerry.
So the concept, yeah.
Well, we certainly get the idea. I want to thank you. We're going to be back in touch with you as we move forward once this IPO is out and getting an update on it from time to time. All right?
I can't wait.
All right.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, Kerry Lutz, Financial Survival Network, broadcast and Substack. Coming up, the story behind the story, a little lighter fare than often. Do you remember when you first learned to drive? Do you remember, or did you teach your children to drive?
You can connect with Larry on Twitter at Larry Connors USA.
I want to share something with you. Cooking a pizza using coal creates an amazing pizza. Only one place to get it, Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in Chesterfield. Of course, they offer a wide variety of pasta, but you just visit the website NapoliSTL.com, dine in or take out, and get ready for patio season. Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in Chesterfield Valley. Try it. You can thank me later. So many times, Vincent's Jewelers has helped me surprise someone special. Vincent's, locally owned, can do the same for you, and you don't have to break the bank to get something really nice, maybe even customized. The smile you're going to get back from that special someone, priceless. Check Vincent'sJewelers.com every day because new items are arriving and there are special deals. Vincent's, my only jeweler. Vincent'sJewelers.com. Vincent'sJewelers.com. True comfort is something you should feel every day in your home. It's the quiet of your mornings, the consistency of your indoor temperature, the way your home feels season after season. With Renewal by Andersen, from consultation through installation, everything is handled by one experienced team, built around your home, your schedule. Our exclusive Fibrex material, stronger than vinyl, built for extreme temperatures. And right now, you can save 20% off your entire project. Plus, take an additional $100 off every window and door, up to $1,000. 20% off the entire project. Flexible financing is available, but you need to call by April 30th. 877-WINDOWS. RenewalByAnderson.com. 877-WINDOWS. RenewalByAnderson.com. When insurance companies know you're represented by Onder Law, they know Onder is not going to let you be pushed around. Their reputation is built on years of courtroom battles. If you suffer an injury or damage to your property, serve the insurance company notice. You have Onder Law on your side, a St. Louis firm you can trust to protect you at every term. Don't settle for less. You want to win? Believe me, Onder wins. Onder, O-N-D-E-R, underlaw.com.
This is News Talk STL.
All my friends know the low rider. The low rider is a little higher.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Now, Larry Connors with the story behind the story.
We're going to pretend like that white van is a kid running out on the road, and I want you to slam on your brakes. Oh. Check mirror and blind spot. Curve slightly. Stop at your first limit line. And then only right here.
That is a video of a driving instructor teaching a young person, probably 15, trying to get a driver's permit and then maybe an official license by age 16, how to drive. How did you do it? How did you get your license? Do you recall? Do you have one? Maybe I should start there. And did you teach your children to drive? We got a lot to talk about. This is all part of the story behind the story today. A little lighter fare than sometimes we present, but I think it goes right to the heart of many of you and your relationships with your children and, of course, your spouse. Yes, I'm going to put that out there. How many spouses tell their driver when they're not driving how to drive? I'm not laying the blame on a gender in particular. I leave that to you, okay? I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to get embroiled in that controversy. Now, when I learned officially to drive, it was a driver's ed class I took during high school as, I guess I was junior at that point. And the car being used by the driver instructor at that time had controls on his side as well, brakes, and an ability to turn the wheel as needed. So it was a class of 3 students each time for that driver's ed class. Boy, did I luck out. It was me and 2 of the beautiful cheerleaders. So if I were not driving, I was sitting in the back seat with one of those beautiful cheerleaders. Oh, I love driver's ed, believe me. And it was at that time that I realized I had an eye problem. According to the eye chart test, I hadn't had one. I don't know if I ever did until that point, and they decided I needed glasses. So they're going to put on my driver's permit, must be wearing glasses. Once I got my permit and then the driver's license itself, it changed. It was on the permit to the learning driver, but then when I got my actual license, that had been removed. I never complained about it. I can see perfectly well. Even now with one eye kind of blinded in the lower right eye, I still have 20/30 vision in both eyes. But at that time, when you're learning to drive, how anxious were you? Your palms are sweaty. You're trying to do everything right. And I was doing especially nervous because I've got these 2 beautiful girls in the back seat, and I want to act like I'm a man. I know what I'm doing, because they were having a lot of problems, to be quite honest. Now, I'll add something else here. We were driving cars at that time that had automatic transmissions. A lot of kids never learn how to handle a manual transmission, how to hit the clutch and shift the gears. And in fact, I don't know how many stories over the decades I've covered about kids trying to steal a car, and they get into the car and they realize, I don't know how to drive this thing. What's this other pedal on the floor for? And how do I get it to even move forward? I mean, they run away and leave the car. They broke into it, but they can't steal it because they don't know how to drive a standard transmission. And then later in the Marines, as part of the training, they want you to learn various skills. And they decided I would be perfect to learn how to drive an 18-wheeler loaded with dynamite and artillery shells up and down the hills of Camp Pendleton. And we're shifting and double clutching on those trucks and just having a ball of a time. And we were carrying a dangerous load. The blasting caps, however, for everything were in the cab with me. The idea was, in case I had an accident, the cab would blow up, but the trailer and all those armaments would not blow up. But do you remember when you first started to drive? And of course, you're very cautious, doing everything the best you can, and sometimes all of a sudden you have car horns everywhere. Well, I learned with horns, but not like this. Everybody out there, if I was doing wrong or of any type, they were hitting the horn at me. Now, it's not as bad as suddenly seeing a flashing red light. Boy, you talk about getting sweaty palms in. But the horns I learned with driving, once I got true driver's education, passing it, and getting my driver's license, we didn't really have a car for me to drive. My dad would let me drive us sometimes when we're on trips. And even before then, I would ask all the time, because there was a time, some of you will know, it was a cold, cold day. You had to go out and start the car, and you let it idle for at least 60 minutes to warm it, get the oil lubricating, and get everything moving before you actually started to drive. That was recommended procedure. Now, it might have even been in the book that came with each car. So Dad would let me do that sometimes when I was even 13 or 14. Can I go start the car, Dad? And I would feel like I'm driving. We're not going anywhere. But I got to start the car. That was a big part of my day. But then where I really started driving, I was facing horns all around me. And I'm not talking about the horns you were hearing then. I'm talking about bull and cow horns. Because I was driving, I think it might have been a 1940 pick-em-up truck, Ford, driving it through the cattle fields to take hay and feed out to the cattle. And they didn't pay attention to the horn when I'd hit the horn at them. They would just go stand there. Or they'd come around and crush against, trying to get to the feed in the back end of the truck. But I learned about horns, but not the car horns. And so then I began to get a chance to drive more and more. And I took my first solo drive and on an extended trip, which I know worried my mother more than my father, all the way from West Texas to Austin, Texas, where my grandparents lived. And then from there on down to Houston, where I had an uncle. This is my first time driving on a road trip by myself. No issues whatsoever, except I did stop at one gas station and drove off and got about 30 miles down the road and realized I don't have my wallet. I left it at the service station. So I drive back as fast as I can, and as I'm pulling in, the station manager comes out with my wallet and says, "Here it is, son. You need to keep it with you." All my money was still in there. That was the time when people had faith in other people and trustworthy. So I continued my trip. And then I got into Houston. I'd never driven on overpasses and freeways like they had in Houston. I mean, again, really tense, as if I were first learning to drive. And parallel parking, now that was another thing that you had to learn. And of course, did you teach, nowadays, I know parallel parking, the car does it by itself. You think, Just turn your hands loose and does it. Come on. What are you learning? Because there'll be a day you're going to be in a car that won't do that. And I understand. I've been told that more recently they don't even have you do parallel parking. I do know when I first started driving, if I could find a spot where you just angled in, that's the part I took. I didn't want to take the parallel parking. But I taught my kids how to drive and parallel park. So, yes, there is more to the story, behind the story.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
Do you know why I endorse Cafe Napoli, all the locations? Visit any of them, and you will quickly appreciate the quality of food, service, atmosphere. So maybe I'll see you at Cafe Napoli in Clayton, Napoli Kirkwood, Napoli 2 in Town and Country, Napoli 3 in St. Charles, right next door to Napoli C. Or maybe you'll find me at Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in the Chesterfield Valley. Now you know why I endorse Napoli, NapoliSTL.com.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Now, the end of the story behind the story.
So you're driving on a highway, and now you got big trucks all around you. That'll make you tense up. And I worried about my daughter recently, and I mean within the last couple of weeks, so has considerable driving experience by now, but she was making a drive from St. Louis to Kansas City, and you know that route is lined with tractor-trailer rigs. Same thing if you're going down to the Memphis area, down to where you split to either go to Memphis or Little Rock, again, lined up with tractor-trailer rigs, barely space to get in between them or around them if you can't do it at one fast move. But I taught my children how to drive. And my oldest, I would have her, would get in a parking lot, showing her how to use a turn signal, when to do it, when to stop, trying to prep her for her driver's test. There was no prepared class in her school for teaching that. And I thought, I don't need to pay an instructor to teach her. I can teach her. And again, I did not have, as my driver's ed coach, when I first took it, controls on my side to hit the brake or turn the wheel. And there are a couple of times I wish I had, but she was getting it down pretty good. And her sister, 2 years younger, sitting in the back seat, also picking up this. And then I taught them how to parallel park. We went into a little neighborhood where you're looking the only spots are parking on the street, and it's parallel parking. And to this day, they say, pull up even with the other driver's door and say, howdy, driver. And then you begin to move back and slowly turn your wheels and making sure the front end clears their rear as you turn back. I taught them all of that. And the first car I bought for my oldest daughter had stick shift. I wanted her to learn how to drive that. She did. And to this date, I'm glad she did. She has obviously moved on from that. She has a son who just got his official driver's license down in Florida, and he went through driver's ed type training. And my younger daughter, who had my first grandson, he's been driving now for several years. He's down in Miami, so he's facing a lot of traffic. But when you're teaching your kids how to drive, you're hoping you're impressing on them, this is a deadly machine. Be aware of what you're doing at all times. And let me take a moment to point out, this is a great season for motorcyclists to be out. I'm a Harley rider, although I think because I'm going to have to give it up because this lower right eye vision is causing issues. The last time I was out on the Harley, riding out to Defiance, in and around the curves and everything, the light coming through the trees like a kaleidoscope, and I'm having a hard time making out some of the turns. I'm not worried about dying. I believe in Christ. I know my Savior. I know where I'm going. But I don't want to be crippled up and have my kids have to take care of me. And I don't want to take down another rider, which is very critical to me. I don't want to hurt someone else. So I told my kids and my daughters, and they were all glad to hear that I was getting off the Harley finally. But I miss it when I hear one rumbling up behind me or near me. Potato, potato, potato. That's the sound of a Harley. I'm not talking about a crotch rocket, which brings me to another near miss I had with a biker. Scared the daylights out of me. Many of you, if you've ever been inside the St. Louis area and you're on Interstate 70 and going up into St. Charles, there's a point where 270 intersects. I'm on 70. I'm to the left of a truck going towards St. Charles. And as we approach or get past the 270 exit for the 270 to go on to 70, there apparently was a motorcycle that joined us at that point. But he's on the other side of the truck. I never saw him. But all of a sudden, and it happened just as I looked down to adjust the vent on my air, he came screaming across the front of me. From the other side of the truck, around the truck, across me, crossing two more lanes. By the time I saw him, I couldn't do anything. But at least he was going at a higher speed than I was, so we didn't have a near miss. But it shakes you because trying to be vigilant, the best you do is try. In a case like that, the kid would have created it, but who would care at that point? I would have killed that driver if I'd hit him, more than likely. So I'm using this also as a public safety message. Be aware and give room to motorcyclists. Be they old, young, riding Harleys, or some crotch rocket. Be aware of that. Make sure you're careful. Now, have I revived some memories of you and when you were teaching your kids to drive? Now maybe your grandchildren, and how you learned when you were driving to begin with? And always worried that, I remember the first time I got pulled over speeding. I mean, I thought I was going to jail forever. I didn't. I made up an excuse. I said, well, I was going fast because I'm trying to dry off my car. I just came out of a car wash. He said, son, that's the first time I heard that excuse. I'm going to let you go, but you got to slow it down. I said, yes, sir. All right, tomorrow is June 11. The story behind the story dates with June 11, 1963, when Governor Wallace stood in the door at the University of Bama denying black students entry. Second hour still to come. Remember our pledge. One nation under God.
You can hear podcast of this program at Larry Connors USA Facebook. Larry Connors USA Facebook.
John Bill Roofing reminds you we are in the stormy season, and that means if you have even the smallest leak in your roof, you could soon have a much bigger issue. Call the John Bill to make sure that your biggest investment is protected. That call can save you major dollars. If you do get hit during a storm, John Bill has a rapid response team. Call 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF, John Bill. There's only one place you can get pizza cooked over coals. Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in Chesterfield Valley. Of course, Napoli Brothers has a great selection of pasta dishes. Between the pizza and pasta, trust me, you will not leave hungry. Then, a few doors down, Lit Cigar Lounge, a wide variety of quality cigars, each offering a unique smoke. That cigar, some premium whiskey, all you need to do is enjoy. Lit Cigar Lounge and Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta, Chesterfield Valley. It's that time of season when families, businesses are moving. For local or long distance, I endorse McGuire Moving. Get a date set soon before the schedules are booked. 314-241-0600. 241-0600. McGuire is constantly giving back to our veterans, such as support dogs for our brave. So with McGuire, you're getting excellent service and helping our vets. McGuireMoving.com. So many times, Vincent's Jewelers has helped me surprise someone special. Vincent's locally owned can do the same for you, and you don't have to break the bank to get something really nice, maybe even customized. The smile you're going to get back from that special someone, priceless. Check Vincent'sJewelers.com every day because new items are arriving and there are special deals. Vincent's, my only jeweler. VincentsJewelers.com. VincentsJewelers.com. Let's be candid, honest. No out-of-state law firm can represent you better than Onder Law. O-N-D-E-R. Hometown roots, attorneys living right here with you and your family. When you suffer an injury because someone else was negligent, Onder Law will make sure the other party takes full responsibility. You'll get full compensation, not a backroom deal worked out with some insurance companies. And of course, we're moving into the stormy season. And again, when you have a legitimate claim, you should be properly compensated. Onder Law does not toy around with adjusters, investigators, lawyers trained to cheat you of what is rightfully yours. Onder Law has already recovered millions for families across Missouri and Illinois. Onder wins. Not just a catchy phrase, it's a fact. So I'll repeat it. Onder wins. OnderLaw.com. O-N-D-E-R. OnderLaw.com. Wins.
This is News Talk STL.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Got myself a gun. Mama always said I'd be the chosen one.
NASA is describing this as one of the most complex missions ever. Like Artemis 2, you'll see 4 astronauts launch on the Space Launch System rocket and Orion spacecraft, but the mission involves 2 other launches. In low Earth orbit, the astronauts are going to be testing Orion's docking capabilities with 2 commercial lunar landers. One will be a version of SpaceX's massive Starship spacecraft. The other lunar lander is being designed by Blue Origin, which plans to send it to space on its New Glenn rocket. But last month, one of the company's New Glenn rockets exploded on the launch pad during an engine test. NASA officials are helping the company investigate the problem in hopes of getting New Glenn flying again soon, but they're also looking at the possibility of finding a different rocket to deliver Blue Origin's lunar lander to space. The U.S. is really moving fast. They want to land astronauts on the lunar South Pole in 2028.
That's a phenomenal program, still moving forward, part of the NASA project, part of the Trump project. And Artemis 3, as you were hearing in that report, they're still looking at getting us to the moon again. Artemis 3 planned originally as the first crewed lunar landing of the Artemis program since the Apollo 17 in 1972. This time the lunar South Pole. So we're moving closer to that. It is exciting. And, of course, then there's the talk about Mars. And it's not just going to those planets and everything and establishing what we can or cannot do. It's also making sure security issue for what we can do in space regarding other countries, China, Russia, maybe North Korea, using satellites trying to hurt U.S. citizens or the rest of the world. So there's a lot at stake still behind the scene here. By the way, speaking of our enemies, President Trump has issued a statement to Iran. Of course, we did respond to them shooting down that Apache helicopter, both crewmen surviving. And in fact, the drone landed in the craft between the 2 crew members. Thank God it did not explode. But they did crash into the ocean. They were safely rescued, and Trump made sure there was payback. We hit some of the targets in Iran, as we should. But his statement to Iran now is, the time for talks is over. Act now or pay the price. Act now or pay the price. And don't think he doesn't mean it. I want to share this with you. This is the kind of hypocrisy and the idiocy that's happening. There was an alleged knifeman. There was a knifeman, let me put it that way, that attempted to behead someone in Belfast. Been arrested. It took place in North Belfast, Northern Ireland, in the United Kingdom. The attacker, identified as a 30-year-old Sudanese national, decided he was going to take someone's head off. And in fact, according to some statements, he clearly said, "I'll kill you." And then later at the hospital, told detectives, "I've killed someone. I don't know if they are dead." Well, they didn't know how bad he did or did not warn them. Then there were rioting actions inside the streets. And Prime Minister Starmer responded to those riots with a warning. And he called the riot scenes shocking, completely unacceptable. He's not calling out the guy that tried to carry out a beheading. This is how they have already destroyed the culture in Britain and the United Kingdom. He's not calling out the guy that tried to carry out the beheading. He's calling out those who are rioting in the streets because of it. Now, I understand we still want to have peace in the streets. But if you're going to condemn the rioters, why don't you step up and condemn the guy that tried to behead someone? They have been radicalized by Muslim infiltration, and it is changing the culture and the look of Germany, England, and other European nations. I had warned you about this. I said, keep an eye on what happens in Europe. It will try to happen here. As I told you yesterday, in case you missed yesterday's program, so you didn't hear about the Islamist running for mayor of Carrollton, Texas, and says he hates the U.S. troops, he hates America, and yet he wants to be elected mayor? And we're allowing this kind of rot to happen right in front of us under freedom of speech, which I'll have to defend freedom of speech, but at some point you got to stand up and protect what we have. All right, welcome to hour number 2, Larry Connors USA, June 10, 2026. Larry Connors USA with you every Monday through Friday right here from 6 to 8 p.m. And when we're on the air right now, we are streaming video. You can watch the program. You go to NewsTalkSTL Rumble, Larry Connors USA Rumble, or Facebook. We give you news, analysis, commentary, and education. You will leave this hour with more knowledge than you have as we begin each hour. That is a guarantee. Hold me to it. And in fact, coming up later, my guest, a mother of 2 children, had to leave the U.S. and go to Italy to get life-saving treatment for her children. Why? Because of the way our government has restricted some procedures that are perfectly safe if they're carried out properly. Now, RFK Jr. has indicated he's going to start loosening a lot of these restrictions, but this mother has her own story to tell about she had to leave the USA to go get help for her children because she could not get it here in this country right now. We will get into that in more detail for you as we move forward. There is good news that came out of Congress, and President Trump has signed it. The $70 billion legislative package funding ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and Customs and Border Patrol protection through 2029. So it funds this operation for the remainder of Trump's term. It was a close vote when it came to the House, only 2 votes difference. That's how big the midterm elections are. And our border czar, Tom Homan, says, yes, now that we have this package, you can expect more arrest of illegals.
When this reconciliation passes, that $70 billion will fund us to the end of the Trump administration. You're going to see targeting increase. You're going to see arrests increase. We're also going to be able to pay our vendors, our detention facilities, our medical contractors. So that means that we're going to do a lot more. We're already, making historic arrests under President Trump, as he promised the American people. But with additional funding, we're going to keep our foot on the gas and keep moving forward.
Going to keep moving forward, keep our foot on the gas. Speaking of that, that's affecting inflation, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. But I first want to return to our border czar Holman and a statement he said which should resonate.
I don't want to meet another angel mom or dad. I don't want another angel mom and dad. I want governors and mayors and members of the Hill to agree with me. If you're in the country illegally and you're a public safety threat, this should be a nonpartisan issue. Let's all work together. For instance, in New York City, Rikers Island, when you have an illegal alien booked in Rikers Island, why did they book him in Rikers Island? Because they obviously perceive him as a public safety threat. So if he's a criminal alien, he's a public safety threat, why in the world would you not work with us to not only remove him from the community, remove him from the country, which makes those streets safer? And as far as the local police, Governor Holcomb made a statement, she wants local cops to do local cop stuff. Well, local cops are doing a lot more local cop stuff because they're arresting the same illegal alien over and over and over again because we don't have access to them and remove them the first time.
Over and over again. And in the blue cities, sanctuary cities, and blue states, sanctuary states, they don't really care if you're here illegally. Even if you've committed a heinous crime, they'll find a way to kind of get you back out on the streets again. They're putting you and your family at risk on a daily basis. They're putting their own families at risk, but they do not accept that fact until it hits home for them. And I do not want even the far left to have a case where they lose a member of their family. But it might take something like that for some of them to turn around and realize we're wrong about what we've been doing. As you know, we have the nation, our nation, on our 250th anniversary, is hosting the World Cup. Countries from all over the world coming. And this obviously raises security issues. Well, a World Cup refuee, let me correct that. A World Cup referee from Somalia was denied entry into our nation. His visa travel was denied because once we started processing, vetting, which would never have happened in the Biden administration, they had concerns of his linkage with several terrorists in other places of the world. So they said, no, you're not going to be allowed to come in. Got sent back to Somalia, where he was greeted as a hero. And Secretary of State Rubio makes it clear, look, we've got even Iran sending some athletes to participate. They're going to be starting in Mexico, then see where they go from there. He says, we're not against the athletes unless they're members of the IRCG and they're actually terrorists posing as athletes, which certainly could be happening. But he says, we're trying to have the World Games here and Mexico and Canada, but at the same time protect our country. Secretary Rubio.
The Iranian team has chosen to stay in Mexico as opposed to the United States in the beginning of the match. And we have no problem with the athletes, as we stated earlier, or their support staff. But what we're not going to allow is for them to embed in their delegation a bunch of people that we know have nothing to do with athletics and have ties to the IRGC or things of that nature. So we were going to watch that very closely, and we'll continue to watch that very closely.
Good.
But by and large, I don't anticipate that problem with any other country.
Good. And he's talking about, again, referees like the one from Somalia we sent back, staff members with the Iranian team. How many of them are actually connected to the team, and their principal job is to help the team or to help further Iranians' terrorist cause against the U.S. or wherever they might be. As he pointed out, they're starting in Mexico. We don't know. We'll see how the games play out. By the way, the U.S. men's national soccer team opens in Friday in Los Angeles against Paraguay. And yet there are thousands of unsold seats in Inglewood, California, where this is being held. Reportedly, FIFA's own direct ticketing website shows more than 100 plus, and there might be even more than that from other sites. More than 3,000 tickets still apparently up for sale. Why are they not being taken for the 69,000 plus seat stadium? Well, the cheapest tickets range from $900 to $1,000. Cost is a factor. The cheapest general sales tickets for the final are 4 times as expensive, whereas they were for the final in Qatar in 2022. The most expensive ticket for the final in 2022 was about $1,600. This year, $11,000. So money is part of it, but also fear, security, no doubt about it. Congressional investigations continue into the Southern Poverty Law Center. The DOJ indictment indicting the Southern Poverty Law Center that it was sending donations, laundering them to hate groups so they would have a boogeyman to fight against and raise more money. Texas Congressman Gooden to the Southern Poverty Law Center CEO.
During the Biden-Harris administration, the SPLC included many mainstream conservative groups in their hate map, including Alliance Defending Freedom, Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA, and Family Research Council. To your knowledge, did the SPLC include Antifa, which is an actual domestic terrorist organization, in its hate group?
We have a list that identifies groups based on the statements that they and their leaders make.
Is Antifa on your hate map?
Again, as I said earlier, Congressman Gooden.
So they're not.
Antifa.
Let me ask you this. Has SPLC labeled the radical left group Jane's Revenge as a hate group? This group has publicly taken responsibility for vandalizing and destroying pregnancy resource centers and Catholic churches since May 2022. Have you all designated that on your hate map?
Congressman Gooden, if you've looked at our hate map, you know the criteria we set for designating groups.
So destroying pregnancy resource centers and Catholic churches would not qualify as hate under your definition. You guys are okay with that. But God forbid Turning Point holds a rally. That's considered hate, but destroying a Catholic church or a pregnancy resource is not. Just to be clear, help me understand.
The SPLC establishes its own criteria, and any other group can create its own list. Under our criteria, we've designated those groups based on what they've said.
Under your criteria, Turning Point USA, Family Research Council, and other conservative Christian groups are considered hate groups. But Antifa and Jane's Revenge, that burns down Catholic churches and pregnancy resource centers, those are not hate groups. It sounds like you're really proud of that process. I'll move on because I frankly think it's disgusting. And you know what? I'd actually ask for you to add me to your hate map.
Yeah.
I'd be honored to be on it. It sounds like I'd be in great company.
Yeah, and add Larry Connors USA. Dr. Alveda King testifying before Congress about SLPC going against Christians.
I reject hatred. I reject white supremacy. I reject any ideology that seeks to elevate one group of people above another. But I also reject the notion that Americans who hold traditional Christian beliefs should be treated as threats or terrorists simply because we disagree with a prevailing political thought. Today, I still have a dream. I dream that one day we will move beyond black power and white power and embrace God's power and human dignity. I dream that Americans will one day see each other not as enemies, but as neighbors. I dream that we will hear each other, see each other, and recognize that every human life has value from the womb to the tomb and beyond.
Dr. Alveda King, the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King. Coming up, screwworm. You know anything about it? I was listening to Chris Arps and Speaker Tim Jones, who have a program on before me every day. I was listening to them yesterday, and both of them admit they didn't. What is screwworm? Well, I can tell you, I dealt with screwworm growing up in Texas and catching it in cattle and doping them up, newborn calves, so they did not get screwworm. I'll explain that for you. And is it going to threaten our beef supply in the nation? Coming up later before we wrap up this hour. But up next, a mother telling her story that she had to leave the U.S. to save her children. She could not get them the medical care they needed in our country because of the laws in this country as they currently exist. Lock and load. Ready on the right.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
Spring weather has everyone sneezing, even inside their home or building. Instead of saying Gesundheit, call Wellington Environmental to perform air tests to determine if mold levels are too high. Gesundheit is the same as saying bless you after someone sneezes, the German word meaning wishing you good health. Wellington Environmental can perform air testing that is simple, fast, and can identify issues keeping you from having good health. Wellington does the same for hospitals and nursing homes for indoor concerns. Give them a call. It's simple. 314-644-4930. 644-4930. Tell Cindy, I need air sampling. They've seen it all. They can help you. Next time you hear Gesundheit, think Wellington. Wellington Environmental. Be well with Wellington. McGuire Moving is silver certified, which means they are great at relocating senior citizens. In fact, McGuire is a household name because McGuire understands the stress involved when moving older adults. So if you or family members need help moving, I highly recommend McGuire Moving. 314-241-0600. 241-0600. Get a free in-home estimate. McGuireMoving.com. John Bill Roofing reminds you we are in the stormy season, and that means if you have even the smallest leak in your roof, you could soon have a much bigger issue. Call the John Bill to make sure that your biggest investment is protected. That call can save you major dollars. If you do get hit during a storm, John Bill has a rapid response team. Call 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF, John Bill. So many times, Vincent's Jewelers has helped me surprise someone special. Vincent's locally owned can do the same for you, and you don't have to break the bank to get something really nice, maybe even customized. The smile you're going to get back from that special someone, priceless. Check Vincent'sJewelers.com every day because new items are arriving and there are special deals. Vincent's, my only jeweler. Vincent'sJewelers.com. Vincent'sJewelers.com.
This is News Talk STL.
I'm chasing tail lights straight as a crow flies, hunting justice down a country road. I've got a shotgun, it's riding shotgun, and we're both fixing to unload. Son, I know what you've done. There's only one way to outrun me. You better pray your tank don't beat mine to eat.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
You might recall some years ago a story of a young boy, 3 years old, Chad Green. He needed a particular chemotherapy to fight cancer. He'd been treated in Nebraska Medical Center in his hometown of Omaha when he was 21 months old. They said the leukemia was in remission, but then they wanted radiation treatment for further protection. It was painful for Chad. His parents decided they were going to take him elsewhere, so they went to Mexico and got him additional medical help that he could not get here. Recently, a Tulsa boy is involved in the same kind of thing. Chad Green did not survive. The Tulsa boy still fighting for his life. My guest has children who've been diagnosed with a rare and often fatal genetic disease. And she was not able to get what she needed here for her children, so she went to Italy. Kendra Riley, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
There is, as you know, Congress has the Right to Try for Individualized Treatment Act underway that would give patients access to cutting-edge gene and cell therapies. If you want it for yourself or your children, that would have made a difference in your case or not?
Absolutely would have, yes. Instead of having to move our family overseas for 6 months during the pandemic, we could have gotten that treatment here in the U.S. So that's what this legislation will do for other families like ours.
Well, give me some background on your children and what you were dealing with at that point, and then making that decision you're only going to get the treatment you need in Italy.
Yeah, so 2 of our 3 daughters were diagnosed with a really rare terminal illness called metachromatic leukodystrophy, or MLD. Very aggressive disease. Within 3 months of my first daughter's diagnosis, she lost the ability to walk, then talk, then became tube fed. When we got our second daughter's diagnosis a few months later, thankfully found out she was young enough as a newborn with 0 symptoms to get a treatment that could potentially save her life. For our other daughter who was symptomatic, it was too late. Come to find out, the treatment that could save our youngest daughter's life was only available in Italy. So we had to raise about $500,000, move our family to Italy during the pandemic, and get her this treatment. Unfortunately, the original Right to Try bill didn't cover this type of treatment.
Yeah, you had to raise the money for it because you're going out of country, got to live there and everything. You had 2 daughters. Are both of them still alive and dealing with this?
Yes, but our oldest daughter, who originally got the diagnosis, she is now 8 years old, in hospice at home, takes 11 medications a day to stay pain-free, and we're not sure how much longer we have with her.
Oh my.
We're amazed, quite honestly, that she made it to 8, whereas our daughter that got the treatment in Italy is a normal, happy, healthy, thriving 6-year-old that is going to school, singing Taylor Swift, running, doing gymnastics, and all the things. You'd never know.
Well, praise God for that, and our prayers for you and your other daughter. And I cannot, as a parent of 2 daughters, parents of children, I know it's ripping at their heart to hear your story, but the issue here is if you wanted the treatment, but it wasn't being authorized here, you had to go elsewhere. The idea of the right to try for individualized treatment could have made a big difference for you and may or may not affected what the outcome is for your oldest daughter.
Absolutely, yeah. If something like this would have been available in time, we could have potentially saved both of them.
Well, I know a lot of parents out there, they are maybe parents for the future that are listening. You don't have kids now, but at some point you will. And so what if your child comes down with something like this, and yeah, you know it's available, but it's not available in the USA, yet it's being practiced successfully elsewhere. This new bill might give you that opportunity. And as far as what would you have to say to them as hopes of getting this bill all the way through Congress in time to maybe save their children's lives today or the future?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just any rare disease patient, really. I mean, science and technology is moving so fast, but bureaucracy isn't up to speed with it. This bill helps with exactly that and makes sure that government red tape isn't going to prevent you from accessing a treatment that could save you or your child's life.
It's been introduced, co-signed in the Congress, in the House, by Congresswoman Diana Harsberger, and then in the Senate, Ron Johnson. It basically is to create a pathway for patients to have individualized treatment that often fall outside the FDA traditional approval process. A lot of us thought, and I still do think, it may still be in the process of happening, that with JFK now heading up our Department of Health, that we would have this happen a lot faster and it would rush through.
Yeah, I mean, he's been making so many positive changes. We did meet with Secretary Kennedy in December when he did add our daughter's disease to the recommended federal newborn screening process. So that was a huge step forward for the leukodystrophy community. And I know he's doing so many great things. I can't imagine this won't be added to the list.
And when you hear stories like yours, I think, all of us should, again, hold our children close and thank God for their health, which I do on a daily and nightly basis. And I know that you're dealing still with one child that, as you describe, is just like any other child, and another one at her age of 8, she's hospice care.
Yes, yeah. And that's what I say about, Right to Try 2.0 in general. It's the difference between a child in hospice and a child in the classroom. And this is going to give hope to so many families where instead of bringing them heartbreak without it.
Well, to that extent, what words of encouragement do you have for the parents out there that have a child and they've already been told you cannot get that treatment, has not been approved by the FDA in our nation?
I would say that, send your support into Congress for this bill. Like, this is a pathway for a really quick way to access treatments that you wouldn't otherwise have been able to, and you won't have to move your family out of the country to do it now if this passes. So it's going to be a game changer for sure for any rare disease patient.
You're listening to Kendra Riley, who had daughters diagnosed with MLD, very rare, often fatal genetic disease. The daughter that's doing better now, since we're talking about genetic disease, is there a concern as to when she has children?
There is. We don't know what the future holds for her in that regard. She was the 32nd child in the world to receive this gene therapy treatment. So a lot of our process with her moving forward and developing each day is looking towards the other families that came before her and how their children are doing. The second child in the world that received this same treatment is a thriving 16-year-old boy who plays basketball and is about to get his driver's license. So we are very hopeful for her future.
So it's still so recent. Your daughter being the 32nd, and you talk about the second one, none of them have reached adulthood yet and have been fathering or parenting, mothering, rearing and giving childbearing to children of their own at this point. So we don't know what the future holds, do we?
Right, yeah. And I mean, the gene therapy she received, part of that whole process was a couple days of chemotherapy. And I think that's the biggest concern with becoming a parent for her in the future is how did that affect her internally? So as she develops, it's just doing those regular checkups with doctors and making sure everything internally is working as it should.
I would tell you on behalf of this audience, our prayers are with you and your family. And
thank you so much.
And the prayers for your child that's in hospice care already at the age of 8, and your other child that we pray they continue to develop normally and are perfect in the future for themselves and their families. I thank you for you taking the time to just tell us your story.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Kendra Riley. The bill is again titled the Right to Try for Individualized Treatments Act. If you make the decision, I want my child to have this opportunity, don't make me try to have to raise money to go elsewhere. Again, going back to Chad Green on his story, that was back in the 70s. And we're still at this point where if you're going to get some treatment that is obviously being used elsewhere and successful, you're going to do everything you can for your child. Getting this act passed would free the hospitals and doctors from facing lawsuits if something goes wrong with it. Because in some cases, it might still be experimental. But if that's the last chance for your child, I'm not going to tell you what you should do, but I'll tell you what I would do, and that was Ken. Again, keep Kendra Riley and her family in your prayers, will you? By the way, drug prices fell for the third straight month in May. Trump said he'd push lower costs at the pharmacy counter, and according to the latest stats, drug prices did drop off again. Coming up, we're going to be dealing with issues like Graham Plattner and how the Dems still hold tight to him.
You can connect with Larry on Twitter at Larry Connors USA.
When insurance companies know you're represented by Under Law, they know Under is not going to let you be pushed around. Their reputation is built on years of courtroom battles. If you suffer an injury or damage to your property, serve the insurance company notice. You have Under Law on your side, a St. Louis firm you can trust to protect you at every term. Don't settle for less. You want to win? Believe me, Under wins. Under, O-N-D-R, underlaw.com. McGuire Moving is Silver certified, which means they are great at relocating senior citizens. In fact, McGuire is a household name because McGuire understands the stress involved when moving older adults. So if you or family members need help moving, I highly recommend McGuire Moving, 314-241-0600. 241-0600. Get a free in-home estimate. McGuireMoving.com. When I have business clients or guests from out of town, I often take them to Cafe Napoli. I know they're going to enjoy any of the Napoli locations. Cafe Napoli in Clayton, Napoli 2 in Town and Country, Napoli 3 in St. Charles, next to Napoli C, Napoli Kirkwood, or Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in the Chesterfield Valley. Excellent food and intellectual conversation, if they bring the intellectual conversation. And NapoliSTL.com. NapoliSTL.com. You should know that when I endorse Wellington Environmental, it's because I believe and know they will do you right. Wellington takes pride in providing homeowners and businesses whatever they need. You need some dustless blasting, they will take care of that. You need some mold remediation, they can do that. They take pride in training their team to perform multiple services and having the equipment ready to get jobs finished. That's important to you. You make just one call, and you call a company that's been around for more than 35 years with more than 45 technicians in the field. Most of you know finding good workers, then having them show up on time could be difficult. Not for Wellington Environmental. They're there at the designated time, ready to go. Check them out to see what they could do for you. Dustless blasting or anything else you need. Wellington Environmental, 314-644-4930. 314-644-4930. Be well with Wellington.
This is NewsTalk-STL.
Roxanne, you don't have to put on the red light. Roxanne, you don't have to put on the red light. Roxanne.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
First, I want to say that the food supply is completely safe, that this is not a disease or a virus. It's a fly that lays an egg in an open wound of an animal, and it can be treated immediately. In fact, the first case that was reported last Wednesday that we confirmed in South Texas, that calf is now healthy, on his way to recovery, and is going to be just fine. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is where we are in our containment, eradicated this back in the 1960s. So a lot of the people who are watching who are from the farm or rural America know this, that in the 1960s, it was pushed back into Mexico, then into Central America, and back past the Darien Gap in South America. So for 60 years, this has not been anywhere near our country. But not surprisingly, starting in about 2021, with the open border policies of the last administration and the millions of illegal immigration that was happening through South America, Central America, the screwworm began to move with the people. They were moving with them, their livestock. So in 2021, it hit Central America. 22, 23, it hit Mexico, and in 24, it began to make its way towards Texas.
We're talking about the screwworm. Now, again, many of you might not be aware of what that is. I do personally know because I was working with my grandfather at his ranch in the 60s, late 50s and 60s, and we were often, newborn calves are most susceptible for getting this. And treating screwworms at that time was a hands-on task. Literally, we had to rope the calf, get them down, sometimes scrape the larva from the animal's wounds, and then put a chemical treatment on it. We call it a dauber. It was a purple color. So once you daub the calf, you could tell that we've already treated that newborn calf, normally at their navel, because the blowflies would get in and lay the worms, which would then begin to eat the animal from the inside out. That was a common practice all across Texas up through the mid-1960s and a little bit later than that. The flies would target any open wound. If cattle were branded, they would go to that. If you dehorned some cattle, they would do that. And certainly newborn calves with their navels, they were always exposed. I don't know how many times I'd go at my granddad and would round these cattle up separate the calves from the mothers, which was not easy because mama cows don't want you messing with their calf. I remember one time in particular, we had to get the calf and get it inside the horse trailer and close the gate, and Granddad's trying to treat the calf inside the horse trailer. Mama cow's outside trying to climb into the trailer with him. If she got inside that trailer, I didn't know what was going to happen to Granddad. And he keeps shouting at me, get her away, get her away. Well, I'm hollering and shouting and waving my rope. She's paying no attention to me. We finally got that calf treated and then went going through the herd looking for other newborn calves, rope them, tie them, hold them down, daub them, as we call it then, with this purple mixture of chemicals. They were treating them and protecting them. And if you got that purple, I mean, after a day of doing that, you got it all over yourself, and it stayed with you for days. It didn't wash off that easily. But again, the idea was to protect them from screwworms. Now, you were hearing in that case from our Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins about how this has manifested itself once again in our nation, because we did have it eradicated, and now it's back. We eradicated it basically in the mid-'60s, maybe a little bit after that time. We're talking about the screwworm, which is a part of a species from a parasitic blowfly who lays the larva on living tissue of warm-blooded animals. Often you might call them maggots. And the maggots of many fly species will eat flesh, infesting wounds, and attacking healthy tissue. A lot of cattle were lost to that until they started daubing them and treating them that way, but we got rid of it. But you heard Brooke Rollins point out, but it's back and it's part of because of the Biden open border policy. Now here is again where you're going to hear the left cry out, oh, you want to blame it all on Biden. I'm looking at a piece from The Hill, which is a leftist-leaning publication. Headline, Trump officials play Biden blame game as screwworm spreads, based directly off of what you were hearing her say. And they're all, they say, according to the Hill publication, the familiar playbook, blame former President Biden. But it is back, as you heard from Brooke Rollins, our Ag Secretary. And the lax immigration policies do occur. The blowflies have either attached themselves to the illegals coming across the border, maybe pets if they're trying to do that, or they're getting close enough to the border, then they cross the border anyway. Listen, a blowfly, just like a rabid skunk, does not recognize a state, county, or national line. They're going to cross if they can. But the illegals coming across were carrying diseases in many cases that we pretty much have wiped out in our nation. And they were not being checked for that before they were let into the country, much less vetted to see if they might be terrorist activities. And Rollins is pointing the blame directly at Biden. To read her statement, under the last administration, with a massive movement under the open borders policy, the cartel, so forth, that's when the screwworm began to make its way back up through America, hitting Mexico in 2023 and moving its way to North Mexico in 2024. And, of course, now it's on our Texas border and once again showing up in Texas cattle all the way up into Missouri. Now, again, the statement she's making is that our beef will be protected because we're on top of it. But we shouldn't have to be dealing with it. I told you previously, not that Biden cared, but he had no idea the damage he was doing to our country by his open border policy. Here is another example. It's not the worst of the worst. That would be children that got trafficked into our nation, that Biden basically served as a pedophile pipeline to get children into our nation to go to pedophile dens, never to be seen or heard from again. And again, I ask, how in the hell can you sleep at night when you know you're responsible for that? And that does not include just Biden, not just his administration. Every leftist Democrat out there, or even so-called conservative, who says, well, letting them in, they can have a better life. Yeah, but they come legally. And then we can have contact with them. We don't know where 400,000 children are that came into our country. We don't even know where they are. We're still trying to track them down and find them if they're alive, rescue them. And we have been doing that. But unfortunately, it's going to happen too late for some. It's like the movies where someone's going to die if someone doesn't get there quickly, and then suddenly at the last second, someone shows up and saves their life. It will happen too late for some. Graham Plattner, of course, with the help of the Democrats, ended up winning the Maine primary to run against Susan Collins in Maine. Even Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez out of New York admitted that the Senate candidate, Graham Plattner, is hard to stomach because of his past and his Nazi tattoo and thinking and saying, oh, I didn't really realize what that was. You're an idiot. You're an idiot if you believe that statement. And a lot of the left was just willing to, it's a one-off. Let's just let it go. And all the other things he's been involved in. Sexual things that basically were targeting women, not his wife. That is, again, an issue between him and his wife, but it's a character issue. And then when he gave his speech accepting the nomination, apparently he basically, according to California Congressman Ro Khanna, he did so many things right.
His speech showed both humility and strength. He talked about Maine giving him grace, Maine giving him a second chance. He talked about the need to earn people's votes. So this was not an arrogant speech. He understands he needs to do work, and he understands they're giving him a chance at redemption. And yet he was strong. He said, I'm going to tax the billionaires. I'm not going to have these foreign wars. I'm going to take on the corporate interests and PAC money. I'm going to call for the release of the Epstein files. We have not had a candidate with that kind of clarity and strength run against Collins.
So you think that was clarity that makes him a good candidate to run against Susan Collins. And he was humble and giving humility and acknowledging, I've been given a second chance. Thank you, Maine duped up Democrat voters. They are so anxious to replace Collins, and she's not a great Trump supporter. She's voted against the president numerous times. I'm not even sure she truly represents her constituency, but she is a Senate Republican, at least by name. And if you get Graham Plattner in there, that's another seat lost to the Democrats. And when you got people like AOC admitting it, he's hard to stomach, but we need him. And you got Ro Khanna saying, yeah, he's got all this, but he's getting a second chance. Give the guy a second chance. Yeah, give somebody a second chance to screw our nation. And the Democrat Party has no problem with that. I don't want to hear lectures on morality anymore at any time in the future from the Democrats about whatever Trump did or did not do. And yes, I even condemned Trump on some things and other Republican candidates. But I don't need the left lecturing me when they're willing to accept a Nazi and a guy that's been involved in numerous sexual escapades and probably still is. And it's just now being apologetic so I can win. I'll do anything to win. I'll show I'm humble and I thank you for a second chance. Ro Khanna said his speech was full of apology and clarity. GOP analyst Shermichael Singleton sees it a different way.
Perhaps clarity, but not moral clarity. He talked about grace. He had several different lines about grace. What about the grace for the women who made serious allegations against him, reported in the New York Times? He talked about Susan Collins being corrupt. He talked about Susan Collins voting to give funding to ICE, taking our neighbors and putting them in unmarked vans. So now he's a warrior for minorities. The same guy with a Nazi tattoo, and he didn't know it was a Nazi tattoo, or the only people I know who get Nazi tattoos on their chest are actual Nazis. This is going to be an election about character. Now, the voters in Maine may not like every single thing about Susan Collins, but Susan Collins is a woman who broke a lot of history, who does have bipartisan support, who has not always voted with her party. She's not a person who supports women merely when it's convenient for her, as we're seeing with Graham Plattner, who I thought it was very ironic that he was surrounded by a ton of women in the midst of giving this campaign speech. This will come down to someone they know versus a guy who uses and says whatever he has to say to get his way, and I don't think it's going to work.
Sir Michael Singleton, a GOP analyst. And it wasn't just ironic he's surrounded by women. They made a point to do that, show that women support him. And you look at all the fraud we've exposed that happened during the Biden administration and continues even now. Texas Congressman Gill.
Democrats are doing everything they can to keep as many of these illegal aliens, people who came into our country illegally, here as possible, and we don't need to look any further than the temporary protected status, or TPS system. Temporary protective status, which was originally intended to be just that. It was intended to be temporary, a temporary reprieve from deportation due to specific circumstances. Yet the Biden administration abused it and has utilized TPS as a form of backdoor amnesty for over 1 million people who entered our country illegally. The numbers speak for themselves. At the start of the Biden administration, there were just about 410,000 TPS beneficiaries from 10 countries. In 4 years, that number increased by over 1 million to 1.4 million. About half of all current TPS beneficiaries weren't even residing in the United States until after Joe Biden took office.
Yeah, thank you,
In other words,
Joe Biden.
TPS was a vehicle for providing backdoor amnesty for the very people that the American people saw pouring into our border for 4 years and voted President Trump into office to deport.
Good. TPS, the first word, temporary status, temporary. Biden using the backdoor policy to get more of the men under temporary status. President Trump's talking again today that said, well, we're going to have to attack Iran again, and making it clear to them they're slow talking the talks. He knows it. We all know it. And he's warning Iran the time for talks is over. You're either going to act now or you're going to pay the price. He stated from the White House Oval Office earlier today that we're tired of them slow walking and stalling. They are either going to step forward and we're going to have a true peace or we're not. And he says, yes, we will attack Iran again. Stand strong. Stand strong. As always, thank you for listening. Tell your family and friends this is a program they do not want to miss. Larry Connors, USA. 6 to 8 every Monday through Friday. And remember our pledge, one nation,